The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for kilometers in every direction, its crystalline walls reaching toward a ceiling that disappeared into artificial clouds. Representatives from 800 different species sat in their assigned sections, each area designed to accommodate the unique environmental needs of its occupants. The Zephyrians required methane-rich atmosphere, so their section was enclosed in shimmering force fields. The silicon-based chronic delegates sat in pools of molten rock that would instantly kill most other species. The aquatic tide singers floated in massive water spheres suspended throughout their designated area. At the center of it all, on a raised platform that slowly rotated to give every delegate a clear view, stood the Council of Elders. 7 ancient beings from the founding species, each representing thousands of years of galactic civilization. Their ceremonial robes flowed with patterns that told the story of their race's contributions to the greater galactic community. Elder Vorthak of the Hegemony adjusted his neural crown, the crystalline structure that allowed him to communicate directly with the minds of every delegate present. His species had developed this technology over 50,000 years ago, making them natural leaders in galactic diplomacy. The Hegemony had been the first to propose the formation of the Galactic Council, back when humans were still discovering fire. Elder Thessarian of the Void Walkers floated beside him, her gaseous form contained within a sophisticated environmental suit that allowed her people to interact with solid matter. The Void Walkers controlled the most advanced space-folding technology in known space, making interstellar travel possible for species that had not yet developed their own faster-than-light capabilities. The other elders represented equally impressive civilizations. The architects of Krell, who had designed most of the galactic infrastructure. The Mind Weavers, whose psychic abilities allowed them to resolve conflicts before they escalated to violence. The Star Shapers, who could manipulate stellar energy to power entire sectors. The Timekeepers, who understood temporal mechanics better than any other species. And the Data Lords, who maintained the vast information networks that kept galactic civilization functioning. Today's session was supposed to be routine. Budget allocations for the next galactic cycle, trade route adjustments, and the formal induction of 3 new species into the Council's protection. The humans of Earth were among those 3 species, having recently achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with galactic civilization. Elder Vorthak had reviewed the human file extensively. They were a young species, barely 10,000 years removed from primitive agriculture. Their technology was crude by galactic standards, their ships slow and inefficient. They had no significant resources that other species couldn't provide more easily. Their planet was small and located in an unremarkable star system on the outer rim of the galaxy. The humans had requested membership in the Galactic Council with what the Elder considered amusing confidence. They claimed to offer unique perspectives and innovative solutions to galactic challenges. Vorthak found their optimism endearing, like a child insisting they could help adults with complex problems they couldn't possibly understand. The human delegation sat in the newest section of the chamber, hastily constructed to accommodate their oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere requirements. There were only 12 of them, a laughably small diplomatic team compared to other species delegations. The Zephyrians had sent over 300 representatives. The Tide Singers had 200 floating in their water spheres. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat at the front of the human section, wearing a simple dark blue uniform that looked primitive compared to the elaborate ceremonial wear of other species. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical style, and she carried only a small digital tablet instead of the massive ceremonial artifacts that other ambassadors displayed. Next to her sat Dr. Marcus Webb, the human chief scientist, and General Patricia Morrison, their military representative. The rest of their delegation included economists, cultural experts, and technical specialists. They looked remarkably ordinary compared to the exotic beings surrounding them. Elder Vorthak opened the session with the traditional harmonic resonance that signaled the beginning of formal proceedings. The chamber fell silent as delegates activated their translation systems and prepared to address the day's agenda. The first few hours proceeded exactly as expected. Budget allocations were approved with minimal debate. The architects of Krell presented their infrastructure expansion plans, which would bring advanced transportation networks to 14 new sectors. The Star Shapers announced successful completion of stellar stabilization projects in 3 systems, preventing solar collapse that would have destroyed multiple inhabited worlds. Then came the trade route discussions, and everything began to change. The proposed expansion into Sector 847 presents significant logistical challenges, announced Delegate Krex of the Commerce Guild, his 4 arms manipulating holographic displays that showed shipping lane projections. Current estimates suggest a 47% increase in transport costs for all Outer Rim deliveries. Ambassador Chen raised her hand, a simple gesture that seemed almost quaint in a chamber where other species communicated through bioluminescent displays, pheromone releases, or direct neural broadcasting. Elder Vorthak nodded to acknowledge her. The human delegation wishes to speak? Sarah Chen stood, her movement smooth and confident despite being surrounded by beings who could crush her ship with their thoughts or rearrange matter at the molecular level. Thank you, Elder Vorthak. We've reviewed the Commerce Guild's projections, and we believe there's a more efficient solution. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the chamber. Several delegates made sounds that their translation systems rendered as polite chuckling. Please, share your thoughts, Elder Vorthak said, his tone gentle but condescending. He was curious to see what the humans thought they could contribute. Sarah activated her tablet, and a holographic projection appeared above the human section. It showed the same shipping lanes the Commerce Guild had displayed, but with subtle modifications. By adjusting the entry vectors for the primary trade routes and utilizing gravitational slingshot techniques around these 3 gas giants, we can reduce transport time by 22% while simultaneously cutting fuel costs by 31%. The chamber fell quiet. Delegate Krex's arms moved rapidly as he ran calculations on his own systems. The architects of Krell leaned forward, their crystalline faces reflecting the holographic display as they analyzed the proposed modifications. Impossible, Delegate Krex announced after several minutes. The gravitational stresses would tear apart any ship attempting those trajectories. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside Ambassador Chun. Not with proper shielding modifications. We've tested similar approaches in our home system. The key is dynamic field adjustment that compensates for gravitational variance in real time. Your species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel, said Elder Thessarian, her voice emanating from speakers mounted on her environmental suit. How could you possibly have developed techniques that our most advanced civilizations have not discovered? Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions that experience overlooks, Sarah Chun replied calmly. We're not constrained by assumptions about what's impossible. Elder Vorthak felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in centuries, uncertainty. The human proposals were being verified by the chamber's analysis systems, and preliminary results suggested their calculations were correct. Not just correct, but elegantly simple in a way that made him wonder why no one had thought of these approaches before. The session continued, but the dynamic had shifted. When the discussion moved to resource allocation for the outer colonies, the humans proposed a distribution network based on seasonal stellar positions that would reduce supply delays by 40%. When border security came up, they suggested patrol patterns that would provide better coverage with 20% fewer ships. Each proposal was met with initial skepticism, followed by careful analysis, and then reluctant acceptance that the humans had identified genuine improvements to systems that had been in place for thousands of years. As the day progressed, Elder Vorthak noticed something troubling. The other elders were becoming defensive. Elder Krythak of the Architects was questioning every human suggestion with increasing hostility. Elder Mordhak of the Timekeepers was dismissing their ideas without proper analysis. The Mind Weavers were attempting to probe human thoughts, only to discover that human minds were surprisingly resistant to psychic intrusion. During a recess, the elders gathered in their private chamber, a space shielded from all forms of surveillance or outside influence. This is unacceptable, Elder Krythak declared, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated energy. These primitives are making us look incompetent in front of the entire council. Their solutions are mathematically sound, Elder Vorthak pointed out, though he shared his colleagues' discomfort. That's exactly the problem, Elder Thessarian said. If a species this young can identify flaws in our systems, what does that say about our leadership? We've maintained order in this galaxy for 50,000 years by being the source of wisdom and advanced thinking. Elder Morthack's temporal senses were detecting probability fluctuations that disturbed him deeply. I'm seeing potential futures where other species begin questioning our authority. If the humans continue to demonstrate superior problem-solving abilities, it could destabilize the entire power structure we've built. Then, we contain them, Elder Krythak said flatly. We limit their participation, restrict their access to key discussions, and make sure their contributions are properly filtered. Elder Vorthack considered this, but something about the idea felt wrong. The humans haven't shown any desire for power or control. They seem genuinely interested in helping solve problems. For now, Elder Thessarian replied. But what happens when they realize how much more advanced they could become with access to our technology? What happens when other species start turning to them for solutions instead of us? The elders returned to the main chamber with a new agenda. Subtle but unmistakable, they began steering discussions away from topics where human input might be valuable. When Sarah Chun attempted to contribute to a debate about energy distribution networks, Elder Vorthack politely suggested that such complex matters were best handled by species with more experience in galactic administration. But the damage had already been done. Representatives from dozens of species had witnessed human problem-solving capabilities firsthand. During the evening break, informal conversations buzzed with discussions of human proposals. The Tide Singers were particularly intrigued by human insights into fluid dynamics. The silicon-based chronic delegates were impressed by human approaches to crystalline structure optimization. Ambassador Chen noticed the shift in the elders' behavior immediately. As a career diplomat who had negotiated everything from trade disputes to peace treaties on Earth, she recognized the signs of a power structure feeling threatened. She had seen it in corporate boardrooms, government meetings, and international conferences. The pattern was always the same: initial openness, growing discomfort as established assumptions were challenged, and, finally, defensive behavior designed to protect existing authority. That evening, in the privacy of their diplomatic quarters, the human delegation held their own meeting. "They're freezing us out," General Morrison observed. "Classic power play. Make us feel welcome until we prove we're not as harmless as they thought. The question is what we do about it," Dr. Webb said. "Some of our proposals could genuinely help millions of beings across the galaxy. The energy distribution modifications alone could improve life for entire sectors." Sarah Chin stared out the viewport at the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. Hundreds of ships from across the galaxy were docked at various levels, representing the greatest concentration of interstellar civilization ever assembled. It was beautiful and impressive, but also revealed something troubling about how power was distributed. "They've built a system that depends on other species believing they're the only source of advanced solutions," she said slowly. "Our presence threatens that assumption." "So what's our play?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, their xenobiologist. "Do we back down and accept a junior role, or do we push forward and risk making enemies of the most powerful beings in the galaxy?" Sarah turned back to her team, her expression resolute. "We do what humans have always done when faced with systems that don't work. We find a better way." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Long-range sensors had detected massive fleet movements in the Andromeda Spiral, where the hostile Devourers had been contained for over 1,000 years. The Devourers were an ancient machine intelligence that consumed entire solar systems to fuel their endless expansion. They had been stopped at the edge of Andromeda by a combined galactic fleet, but the cost had been enormous. Millions of ships destroyed, entire species nearly wiped out, and a containment system that required constant maintenance and vigilance. The containment field generators were failing. Without immediate action, the Devourers would break free and begin consuming their way through inhabited space. Conservative estimates suggested they could reach the core worlds within 50 standard years, leaving a trail of empty, lifeless systems behind them. Elder Vorthack called an emergency session, and the chamber filled with urgent voices from hundreds of species. The traditional calm of the council was replaced by barely controlled panic as representatives contemplated the destruction of everything their civilizations had built. "The containment system requires complete reconstruction," announced Elder Krythak. Our preliminary analysis suggests a minimum time frame of 12 standard years, assuming we can dedicate 70% of our combined industrial capacity to the project. 12 years. The voice belonged to Delegate Sephrin of the Aquatic Alliance. Our projections show containment failure within 8 years. We'd be building defenses around systems the Devourers have already consumed. Elder Thessarian's gaseous form swirled with agitation. The mathematics are clear. There is no way to reconstruct the containment system quickly enough with our current technological approaches. The chamber erupted in desperate discussions. Species representatives called for evacuation plans. Others demanded impossible acceleration of construction timelines. Some suggested abandoning the outer rim entirely and fortifying the core worlds, a plan that would condemn billions of beings to death. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Chen stood up. Her simple gesture was lost in the noise and panic of the chamber. She cleared her throat and spoke, but her voice was drowned out by hundreds of simultaneous conversations. General Morrison stood beside her, then Dr. Webb, and gradually the entire human delegation was on its feet. Elder Vorthak noticed them first and called for order. The human delegation wishes to address the council. Thank you, Sarah said as the chamber slowly quieted. We've been analyzing the containment system specifications and the Devourer threat assessment. We believe there's a solution you haven't considered. A bitter laugh came from somewhere in the Zephyrian section. The humans think they can solve in one day what our greatest minds have declared impossible. Sarah continued as if she hadn't heard the comment. Instead of rebuilding the containment system using the same technology that failed, we propose a completely different approach. Rather than trying to cage the Devourers, we redirect them. Redirect them where? Elder Krythak's voice carried barely concealed contempt. Into empty space? The Devourers will simply change course once they encounter inhabited systems. Dr. Webb stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the galactic map with Andromeda visible at the edge. Not empty space. Another galaxy entirely. The Devourers follow energy signatures and gravitational patterns. If we create a stronger attractant in a galaxy with no intelligent life, they'll follow it automatically. Impossible, Elder Morthak declared. The energy requirements to create such an attractant would exceed our total galactic power output. Not if we use stellar engineering, Sarah said calmly. The Star Shapers have the technology to manipulate stellar output. By coordinating the energy signatures of specific stars in the target galaxy, we can create a trail the Devourers will find irresistible. Elder Thessarian's form pulsed with agitated energy. You're proposing to manipulate stars in another galaxy? The precision required would be beyond any technology we possess. Actually, it's not, Dr. Webb replied. We've run the calculations. The Star Shaper's stellar manipulation technology, combined with the Timekeeper's temporal coordination abilities and the Data Lord's computational power, could achieve the necessary precision. The entire project could be completed in 18 months instead of 12 years. The chamber fell silent. The human proposal was so radically different from traditional approaches that most delegates were struggling to process it. Instead of building bigger walls, the humans were suggesting they redirect the thread entirely. Elder Vorthak's neural crown was working overtime as he ran preliminary calculations. The human mathematics were extraordinary. Not just correct, but elegant in their simplicity. They had identified a solution that combined existing galactic technologies in ways that no one had previously considered. Even if this were theoretically possible, Elder Krythak said slowly, the coordination required between multiple species' most advanced technologies would be unprecedented. The risks of failure would be enormous. The risks of doing nothing are guaranteed extinction, General Morrison pointed out bluntly. Your current plan can't be completed in time. Our plan can be. Over the next several hours, the human proposal was subjected to the most intensive analysis in the Council's history. Teams of the galaxy's greatest scientific minds examined every aspect of the plan, looking for flaws or overlooked complications. They found none. The human solution was not only viable, it was superior to any alternative the combined wisdom of the galaxy's eldest civilizations had produced. The energy shepherds confirmed that the stellar manipulation was achievable. The timekeepers verified that the coordination timeline was realistic. The data lords calculated that their computational systems could handle the required precision. Most troubling of all, the plan would work better than anyone had dared to hope. Not only would it redirect the Devourers away from inhabited space, it would do so permanently. The machine intelligence would spend eternity consuming the empty galaxy the humans had selected, never again threatening galactic civilization. As the session concluded and representatives prepared to return to their respective governments with recommendations, Elder Vorthak found himself facing a crisis that had nothing to do with the Devourers. The humans had just demonstrated that their young, supposedly primitive civilization could solve problems that the galaxy's most advanced species could not. They had done it with humility, offering their solution freely and without demands for recognition or reward. They had potentially saved trillions of lives with a plan that was both brilliant and achievable, and that terrified the Elders more than the Devourers ever could. Because if humans could solve the impossible Devourer crisis in a single day, what other impossible problems might they solve? How long before other species started turning to Earth for guidance instead of to the established powers? How long before the carefully maintained hierarchy that had governed the galaxy for 50,000 years began to crumble? That night, in the shielded privacy of their chamber, the Council of Elders made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. They chose to preserve their power rather than embrace the revolution in thinking that humanity represented. They had no idea that Ambassador Sarah Chun had anticipated exactly this response, and that the humans had already prepared for what would come next. The game was about to change in ways that no one in the galaxy could have predicted. The next morning brought a formal summons to the Chamber of Decisions, a smaller but more intimidating space where the Council of Elders made their most important rulings. Unlike the Grand Public Chamber, this room was designed to emphasize the power and authority of the 7 ruling species. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with the thoughts of the Elders, and the ceiling showed a real-time map of the galaxy with all the systems under Council protection highlighted in gold. Ambassador Sarah Chun walked into the chamber alongside her delegation, noting immediately that they were the only non-elder species present. No other ambassadors had been invited to witness whatever decision the Council was about to announce. That told her everything she needed to know about what was coming. The 7 elders stood in a semicircle on their elevated platform, their various forms creating an impressive display of galactic diversity and power. Elder Vorthak stepped forward, his neural crown gleaming as he prepared to speak. Ambassador Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you and your species for the creative proposal you presented yesterday regarding the Devourer containment crisis. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but she noticed the word creative instead of brilliant or effective. The diplomatic language was already being deployed to minimize human achievement. After extensive analysis and consultation with our most advanced scientific councils, we have determined that your proposed solution, while innovative, presents too many unknown variables and potential risks to implement at this critical time. Dr. Webb started to speak, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm to stop him. She had expected this response and wanted to hear exactly how the elders would justify their decision. Elder Krythak continued the announcement. The coordination between multiple species technologies has never been attempted on this scale. The potential for catastrophic failure could result in even worse outcomes than the current containment breakdown. Instead, Elder Thessarian added, we will proceed with a modified version of the traditional containment system reconstruction. By implementing some minor efficiency improvements suggested by various council members, we believe we can reduce the construction timeline to 9.5 years. Elder Morthak stepped forward, his temporal senses focused on the humans with uncomfortable intensity. We appreciate humanity's enthusiasm for contributing to galactic security, but we feel that a species with your limited experience in interstellar matters should focus on learning from more established civilizations before attempting to guide major galactic policy. The dismissal was complete and crushing. The elders had taken the human solution, declared it too risky despite their own analysis confirming its viability, and then casually mentioned minor efficiency improvements, that were almost certainly derived from human proposals without giving credit. Furthermore, Elder Vorthak continued, we have decided that humanity's membership in the Galactic Council should be adjusted to better reflect your species' current developmental level. Instead of full membership, we are offering you associate status, which will allow you to observe council proceedings and make suggestions through proper channels. Sarah felt her diplomatic training take over, keeping her voice calm and professional despite the anger building inside her. Could you clarify what proper channels means, Elder Vorthak? Associate members may submit written proposals to the Council Secretariat, which will review them for relevance and forward appropriate suggestions to the relevant committees for consideration. This process ensures that all proposals receive proper evaluation by species with extensive experience in galactic governance. In other words, Sarah realized, human ideas would be filtered through a bureaucracy controlled by the elders, allowing them to implement useful suggestions while ensuring humans received no credit or recognition. It was a perfect system for maintaining the status quo while still benefiting from human innovation. General Morrison's jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Dr. Webb looked like he wanted to start explaining exactly why the elders' modified timeline would fail, but Sarah gave him a warning look. They had discussed this possibility at length, and she had a script to follow. I see, Sarah said thoughtfully. And what about the species that have already expressed interest in collaborating directly with Earth on various projects? The Tide Singers mentioned wanting to work with our fluid dynamics specialists, and the Aquatic Alliance was interested in our underwater habitat designs. Elder Vorthak's neural crown flickered with what might have been irritation. All interspecies collaboration must be coordinated through the Council to ensure proper oversight and prevent misunderstandings. Associate members are not authorized to conduct independent diplomatic relations with full Council members. The cage was complete. Humanity would be allowed to contribute ideas, but only through channels the elders controlled. They would be forbidden from forming independent relationships with other species who might value human capabilities. And, most importantly, they would be reminded constantly that they were junior members of a system they had no real voice in. Sarah nodded slowly, as if considering the terms. These are significant restrictions compared to what we understood full membership would entail. I'll need to consult with my government before we can accept associate status. Of course, Elder Thessarian said, her gaseous form rippling with satisfaction. Take all the time you need. The Council is patient with species that are still learning their place in galactic civilization. The meeting concluded with ceremonial pleasantries that fooled no one. The elders had made their position clear. Humanity would be contained and controlled, their innovations harvested while their independence was eliminated. It was a masterful political maneuver that preserved the existing power structure while neutralizing the threat that human capabilities represented. As the human delegation returned to their quarters, Dr. Webb finally exploded. They're going to let billions die because they're afraid of losing face. The modified timeline won't work, Sarah. The containment will fail before they can finish rebuilding it. I know, Sarah said calmly. And they're stealing our ideas while making sure we get no credit and no influence, General Morrison added. It's the most sophisticated subjugation I've ever seen. No weapons, no threats, just bureaucratic strangling. I know that too. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked puzzled. You don't seem surprised by any of this. It's like you expected them to reject our membership. Sarah activated a privacy field generator, one of the few pieces of advanced technology Earth had developed independently. The small device created a bubble of interference that blocked all known surveillance methods used by Council species. I didn't just expect it, she said. I counted on it. The delegation stared at her in confusion. Think about it from their perspective, Sarah continued. They've maintained power for 50,000 years by being the exclusive source of advanced solutions to galactic problems. Suddenly, a primitive species shows up and starts solving problems they couldn't solve. What's their rational response? Eliminate the threat to their authority, General Morrison said slowly. Exactly. But they can't destroy us outright. That would make them look tyrannical to the other species. So they had to find a way to control us while appearing reasonable. The associate status offer was predictable. Dr. Webb was beginning to understand. You wanted them to reject us. I wanted them to reveal their true nature, Sarah corrected. For the past week, I've been having private conversations with representatives from 47 different species. Casual discussions about human perspectives on various problems, informal exchanges of ideas, friendly debates about different approaches to challenges. She activated her tablet, showing a complex web of communication logs and meeting records. The Tide Singers are fascinated by our fluid dynamics work because their current understanding has limitations they've never been able to overcome. The silicon-based chronic delegates discovered that our crystal growth techniques could revolutionize their biotechnology. The energy shepherds found our power distribution concepts so intriguing that they've already started implementing test systems. The implications were staggering. Sarah had been conducting shadow diplomacy, building relationships, and demonstrating human value directly to individual species rather than going through the council hierarchy. More importantly, Sarah continued, I've been sharing something the elders never share: detailed technical specifications, complete mathematical proofs, open access to our research data. I've been showing other species that cooperation doesn't have to flow through a central authority that takes credit for everything. General Morrison grinned with predatory satisfaction. You've been building an alternative power structure. I've been demonstrating that there are alternatives to the current system. And today, when the elders rejected our membership and tried to cage us, every species representative I've spoken with saw exactly what kind of partnership the council really offers. Dr. Vasquez pulled up her own communication logs. I've had similar conversations from the xenobiology angle. At least 30 species have research questions that our techniques could help with, but they've never been allowed to pursue them because the council's approved research methods don't address those specific problems. The council maintains control by being a bottleneck, Dr. Webb realized. Every solution has to flow through them, which means they can take credit and ensure no one else accumulates enough influence to challenge their authority. Sarah nodded. But what happens when species discover they don't need that bottleneck? What happens when they realize they can collaborate directly with each other to solve problems faster and more effectively than the council's committee-based approach allows? The answer was revolution, but not the violent kind that typically destroyed galactic civilizations. This would be a revolution of ideas, relationships, and alternative approaches to cooperation. The kind of revolution that rendered existing power structures irrelevant rather than overthrowing them. Over the next several days, news of the Council's decision spread throughout the galactic community. The official announcement praised humanity's enthusiastic contribution to Council deliberations, while explaining that associate status would allow them to develop their capabilities under proper guidance. But unofficial channels told a different story. Species representatives who had witnessed the Devourer crisis discussions were privately sharing details of the human solution and the Council's rejection of it. The mathematics were being quietly verified by independent scientists across dozens of civilizations. The conclusion was unavoidable. The humans had developed a superior solution that the Council had rejected for political rather than technical reasons. More troubling for the elders, word was spreading about the informal technical exchanges that had been taking place. The Tide Singers publicly announced that they were implementing human-inspired improvements to their atmospheric processing systems. The Energy Shepherds released data showing 23% efficiency gains from power distribution modifications based on human suggestions. Elder Vorthak called an emergency meeting of the Inner Council. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, he announced. 6 more species have announced independent research partnerships with Earth. The Aquatic Alliance is openly questioning why their habitat expansion project was delayed for 3 years when human techniques could complete it in 8 months. Elder Krythak's crystalline form was pulsing with agitated energy. The humans are systematically undermining our authority by demonstrating that our oversight is unnecessary. Worse, Elder Thessarian added, they're sharing their knowledge freely. Complete technical specifications, mathematical proofs, even failures and limitations. No species has ever operated with such transparency. Elder Morthak's temporal senses were detecting probability cascades that terrified him. I'm seeing potential futures where the Council becomes irrelevant within a single generation. Species are calculating that they can achieve better results through direct cooperation with Earth than through our established channels. The Mind Weavers, who had remained silent during previous discussions, finally, spoke through Elder Sithic. We attempted to probe human intentions during their diplomatic interactions with other species. What we discovered is unprecedented. The other elders turned their attention to the psychic species representative. Humans appear to genuinely want to help solve problems without accumulating power over other species. When the Tide Singers asked about implementing human techniques, the humans offered complete assistance with no requests for recognition, resources, or influence. This behavior pattern is completely outside our models for intelligent species development. Elder Vorthak felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. They're not trying to replace us as the dominant power. They don't appear to want to be a dominant power at all. They seem to prefer collaborative networks where multiple species contribute their strengths to solve problems together. They're creating a model of galactic civilization that makes hierarchical control structures obsolete. The implications were staggering. The elders had built their power on the assumption that all species wanted to dominate others, and that the Council's role was to manage that dominance to prevent destructive conflicts. But what happened when a species actively rejected dominance in favor of true cooperation? We have to stop them, Elder Krythak declared. If this cooperation model spreads, it will destabilize everything we've built. How? Elder Thessarian asked. They haven't violated any council laws. They haven't threatened anyone or demanded anything. They're simply offering to help other species solve problems. Elder Morthak's temporal vision was showing him probability streams that split in multiple directions. There are several potential approaches. We could restrict other species' access to Earth by implementing quarantine protocols. We could classify human technology as potentially dangerous and require all exchanges to go through council oversight. We could even declare them a security risk and authorize containment measures. All of those approaches would require us to openly oppose peaceful cooperation between species, Elder Sithic pointed out. How would we justify such actions to the broader council? Elder Vorthak had been running calculations on his neural crown throughout the discussion. The mathematics were clear. Any direct action against humanity would expose the council's true motivations and accelerate the very revolution they were trying to prevent. We can't stop them directly, he concluded. Any obvious move against them will prove their point about hierarchical systems being afraid of cooperative alternatives. Then, what do we do? Elder Krythak demanded. Elder Vorthak's crown pulsed with a complex pattern that indicated deep uncertainty. We prepare for the possibility that the galaxy is about to change in ways we never anticipated. 3 days later, Ambassador Sarah Chun requested a private meeting with the Council of Elders. When she entered the Chamber of Decisions, her demeanor was calm and professional, showing no signs of anger or frustration about the associate status offer. Honorable Elders, she began, I've consulted with my government regarding your generous offer of associate status for humanity in the Galactic Council. Elder Vorthak nodded, expecting either acceptance or negotiation. And what has Earth decided? We're grateful for the opportunity, Sarah said, but we must respectfully decline. The chamber fell silent. In the 50,000-year history of the Galactic Council, no species had ever voluntarily rejected membership of any kind. Furthermore, Sarah continued, I've been authorized to inform you that Earth will be withdrawing its application for any form of Council membership at this time. We believe our species needs more time to develop before we're ready for the responsibilities that galactic governance entails. Elder Thessarian's gaseous form swirled with confusion. You're leaving? We're focusing on bilateral relationships with individual species who share our interests in collaborative problem-solving. We've found that we can be more helpful to our friends by working directly with them rather than through institutional frameworks that were not yet mature enough to navigate effectively. The diplomatic language was perfect, but the message was clear. Humanity was rejecting the Council's authority entirely, while making it sound like they were humbly recognizing their own limitations. This is highly irregular, Elder Krythak protested. No species operates outside the Council's guidance. The galaxy is too complex, too dangerous for independent action. Sarah smiled pleasantly. We understand your concerns. That's exactly why we feel we need to learn more before accepting the honor of Council membership. We'll be establishing a small diplomatic station in neutral space, where we can host meetings with any species interested in informal cooperation. Elder Vorthack's neural crown was processing the implications at maximum speed. The humans were essentially setting up an alternative to the Council, a place where species could meet and collaborate without elder oversight or bureaucratic restrictions. What about the Devourer crisis? Elder Vorthack asked. Surely you're not abandoning the galaxy to face this threat without your assistance. Of course not, Sarah replied. We've shared our complete technical specifications with any species interested in implementing our proposed solution. The Star Shapers, Timekeepers, and Data Lords already have everything they need to coordinate the project. We trust that the Council's wisdom will guide them to the best approach. She was putting the responsibility for billions of lives squarely on the Elders' shoulders. If they used the human solution, they would be admitting that a primitive species had solved what they could not. If they didn't use it, and beings died as a result, they would be responsible for choosing politics over lives. However, Sarah added, if the Council decides that our approach has merit, we've established a technical support network with the implementing species. They can contact our experts directly for assistance with any challenges that arise during implementation. Elder Vorthack understood what was happening, but he was powerless to stop it. The humans were walking away from the established power structure while simultaneously demonstrating that the power structure was unnecessary for effective galactic cooperation. I hope, Sarah concluded, that Earth and the Council can work together in the future when we've developed the wisdom and maturity that galactic leadership requires. Until then, we'll focus on learning from our friends and doing what small good we can in our little corner of the galaxy. The meeting ended with formal pleasantries, but everyone present understood that they had just witnessed the beginning of the end of the Galactic Council's monopoly on interstellar cooperation. Within hours of Sarah's announcement, 17 species formally requested permission to send delegations to the human diplomatic station. By the end of the week, that number had grown to 43. The Energy Shepherds announced that they were implementing the human solution to the Devourer crisis with direct technical support from Earth, bypassing the Council entirely. The carefully maintained illusion that the galaxy needed the Council to function was crumbling, and the Elders found themselves facing a crisis of relevance that threatened everything they had built. The humans hadn't conquered them or overthrown them. They had simply offered a better alternative and walked away. And, in walking away, they had shown every other species in the galaxy that walking away was possible. 6 months after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the diplomatic station New Horizons had become the most active hub of interstellar cooperation in known space. Built in the neutral zone between the spiral arms, it was a marvel of collaborative engineering that perfectly embodied humanity's approach to galactic relationships. Unlike the towering monument to hierarchy that was the Council Station, New Horizons was designed as a collection of interconnected modules, each one contributed by a different species according to their unique capabilities and needs. The central hub was human-built, focusing on efficient space utilization and adaptable environmental systems. The Tide Singers had contributed a spectacular underwater complex for aquatic species, connected by transparent tunnels that allowed other beings to observe their graceful movements through liquid environments. The crystalline architects of Krell had grown a beautiful lattice structure that served as a combination library, laboratory, and meeting space. The silicon-based organisms could live comfortably in the high-temperature sections while others could access the same resources through environmental suits or remote interfaces. The Energy Shepherds had provided power distribution systems that were so efficient they actually improved the performance of every other system on the station. Most remarkably, the entire station operated without a central authority or governing body. Decisions were made through working groups that formed around specific projects or challenges. When the Zephyrian delegation needed modifications to their methane-rich habitat, a volunteer team of engineers from 6 different species collaborated to design and implement the changes in 3 days. When the Data Lords wanted to establish secure communication networks for sensitive research, cryptography specialists from a dozen civilizations worked together to create protocols that satisfied everyone's security requirements. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the central observation deck, watching the controlled chaos of interspecies collaboration through the transparent aluminum walls. In the past 6 months, he had seen problems solved, technologies shared, and relationships formed that would have been impossible under the Council's rigid bureaucratic structure. The Devourer crisis had been resolved 2 months ago, exactly as the humans had predicted. The Star Shapers, Timekeepers, and Data Lords had implemented the Stellar Redirection Protocol with technical support from Earth and 12 other species that contributed specialized capabilities. The machine intelligence was now happily consuming empty galaxies millions of light-years away, never to threaten inhabited space again. The project's success had sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. The combined effort had taken 8 months from concept to completion, compared to the Council's projected timeline of 9.5 years. More importantly, every participating species had gained new knowledge and capabilities through the collaboration. The Star Shapers had learned time coordination techniques from the Timekeepers. The Data Lords had discovered new approaches to computational efficiency from human programmers. The Energy Shepherds had developed revolutionary power storage methods by combining their technology with crystalline matrices designed by the Krell architects. "It's working better than we hoped," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, joining Webb at the observation window. As the station's xenobiology coordinator, she had watched dozens of species discover new possibilities through direct collaboration. "Almost too well," Webb replied thoughtfully. "We're getting results that are making the Council look increasingly irrelevant." Through the window, they could see the Aquatic Alliance delegation testing new underwater habitat designs in partnership with human marine engineers. The prototypes were smaller, more efficient, and easier to construct than anything the Council's committees had approved in the past century. 3-star systems had already requested the new designs for their waterworld colonies. "Have you seen the latest efficiency reports?" Elena asked, activating a holographic display that showed comparative data from across the galaxy. The numbers were stunning. Systems that had joined the New Horizons cooperative network were reporting average improvements of 40% in industrial efficiency, 60% in research and development timelines, and 25% in quality of life metrics. Meanwhile, systems still operating under Council oversight were experiencing increasing delays and resource shortages as their best scientists and engineers requested transfers to join cooperative projects. "The Council is hemorrhaging talent," Webb observed. "Every week, more species are sending delegations here to explore alternatives to the traditional hierarchy." The trend was accelerating. The latest arrivals included the Void Dancers, a mysterious species that had never previously participated in galactic civilization. Their mastery of space-time manipulation could revolutionize transportation, but they had refused all Council overtures for thousands of years. Yet they had readily agreed to share knowledge with the cooperative network, finding the non-hierarchical structure more compatible with their cultural values. Even more significantly, 3 of the founding species of the Galactic Council were quietly sending unofficial representatives to explore cooperative alternatives. The Mind Weavers had sent a small delegation disguised as xenopsychology researchers. The Timekeepers had deployed temporal observers who thought they were operating undetected. The Energy Shepherds had been openly participating in joint projects for months while maintaining their Council obligations. Ambassador Sarah Chun entered the observation deck carrying reports from the latest coordination meeting. Her role had evolved from traditional diplomat to something entirely new. A facilitator who helped species identify opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation without imposing external authority or control. "The Spiral Confederation wants to join the network," she announced. "That's 47 different star systems with a combined population of over 2 billion beings." The Spiral Confederation was a loose alliance of species in the Outer Rim who had always been marginalized by the Council's core system bias. Their worlds were rich in resources, but had been relegated to supplier status rather than being included in high-level decision-making. The cooperative network offered them something the Council never had: equal participation regardless of their location or political influence. "That brings our total to over 300 participating systems," Elena calculated. "We're approaching the point where we'll have more members than the Council itself." The implications were staggering. What had started as a small diplomatic station was becoming an alternative model of galactic civilization. Instead of a centralized hierarchy controlled by ancient powers, It was an organic network of voluntary cooperation based on shared interests and mutual benefit. Any word from the council? Webb asked. Sarah's expression became carefully neutral. They've sent several informal inquiries asking about our long-term intentions. Elder Vorthak has requested a meeting to discuss potential areas of cooperation between our respective organizations. The language was diplomatic, but the subtext was clear. The council was beginning to panic as their monopoly on galactic governance crumbled around them. They were desperately searching for ways to maintain relevance in a galaxy that was discovering it didn't need their oversight to function effectively. They're going to try to co-opt us, Webb predicted. Offer some kind of partnership that lets them maintain control while appearing to embrace cooperation. Probably, Sarah agreed. But they have a fundamental problem. Their entire power structure depends on being the exclusive source of solutions to galactic problems. Our network demonstrates that distributed cooperation produces better results than centralized authority. Through the observation window, they watched a perfect example of this principle in action. A working group of engineers from 12 different species was troubleshooting a quantum resonance problem that had been disrupting subspace communications in the Cygnus sector. The Council's committee-based approach would have required months of bureaucratic review and multiple approval stages. The cooperative working group had identified the root cause in 6 days and was already implementing a solution. The fix involved combining crystalline resonance dampening technology with human signal processing techniques and void dancer space-time stabilization. No single species could have solved the problem alone, and no traditional authority structure could have coordinated the solution as quickly as the voluntary cooperation network had managed. The council elders still don't understand what they're really facing, Elena observed. They think this is about power and politics. They keep looking for ways to negotiate or compromise or maintain control. But it's not about power at all, Sarah finished. It's about effectiveness. Species are choosing cooperation over authority because cooperation works better. The revolutionary nature of the change couldn't be overstated. For 50,000 years, galactic civilization had been built on the assumption that complex societies required hierarchical control structures. Powerful species ruled over weaker ones, elder civilizations guided younger ones, and central authorities coordinated activities that individual groups couldn't manage alone. The New Horizons network was proving all of those assumptions wrong. Complex coordination was happening without central control. Younger species were contributing solutions that elder civilizations had missed. Voluntary cooperation was achieving results that forced compliance never could. More importantly, the beings participating in the network were happier, more productive, and more creative than their counterparts operating under traditional authority structures. Scientists had access to broader ranges of knowledge and research techniques. Engineers could implement solutions without waiting for bureaucratic approval. Cultural groups were sharing art, music, and literature in ways that enriched everyone involved. The transformation was visible in the daily operations of New Horizons Station itself. Traditional diplomatic facilities were sterile, formal spaces designed to emphasize protocol and hierarchy. New Horizons buzzed with energy and enthusiasm as beings from hundreds of different species worked side by side on projects they were passionate about. In the hydroponics lab, human agricultural specialists were teaching crystalline beings how to grow plants in mineral-rich environments while learning how crystalline growth patterns could improve crop yields. The workshop levels echoed with the sounds of void dancer phase shifters collaborating with Krell architects to design buildings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The communication centers hummed with constant activity as data lords worked with human programmers to develop translation algorithms that preserved emotional and cultural context across species barriers. We have a problem, though, Webb said quietly. Success creates its own challenges. Sarah nodded grimly. The growth rate is becoming unsustainable. We're getting more cooperation requests than we can handle with current resources. It was a good problem to have, but still a problem. The network's success was attracting attention from across the galaxy, but expanding too quickly could compromise the quality of cooperation that made the system work. They needed to find ways to help species establish their own regional cooperation nodes while maintaining the connections and knowledge sharing that made the broader network effective. The Void Dancers have offered to help with that, Elena said. Their space-time manipulation technology could create communication networks that connect regional hubs instantly across galactic distances. We could have real-time cooperation between working groups separated by thousands of light years. The crystalline architects are proposing something similar, Sarah added. Living communication networks that grow and adapt based on usage patterns. Instead of fixed infrastructure, we'd have organic systems that evolve to meet changing needs. Webb realized they were witnessing the emergence of something genuinely new in galactic history. Not just a different form of government or alliance, but a completely different way of organizing large-scale civilization. Instead of pyramid structures with power concentrated at the top, they were building web structures where capability and resources flowed along whatever paths proved most effective. The Council is going to fight this, he said. Not openly, maybe, but they can't just let their entire power structure become obsolete without resistance. As if summoned by his words, Sarah's communication device activated with an urgent priority signal. The message was from Elder Vorthak, transmitted through official council channels with full ceremonial encryption. Ambassador Chan. The Elder's image appeared in miniature hologram form. The Galactic Council requests your immediate presence for discussions regarding urgent matters of galactic security. We have detected concerning activities that require coordination between all responsible parties in inhabited space. Sarah looked at her colleagues with raised eyebrows. Urgent matters of galactic security was diplomatic code for a crisis that required setting aside normal protocols. Coming after months of deteriorating council authority, it suggested that the elders had decided to make their move. It could be a genuine crisis, Elena suggested. The galaxy has plenty of real threats that would require large-scale coordination. Or it could be a manufactured crisis designed to demonstrate that the galaxy still needs centralized authority, Webb countered. Sarah was already running through possibilities in her mind. The elders were desperate to restore their relevance, but they were also genuinely responsible for protecting billions of beings across hundreds of systems. They wouldn't risk actual lives just to make a political point, would they? Only one way to find out, she said, activating her reply system. Elder Vorthak, I'll depart for Council Station immediately. I assume this matter is urgent enough to require real-time discussion rather than the normal diplomatic protocols. Indeed, Vorthak replied. Time is a critical factor. We will have transportation standing by for your arrival. As Sarah prepared to return to the Council Station for the first time since Earth's withdrawal, she couldn't shake the feeling that this crisis, whatever it turned out to be, would determine whether the galaxy's future belonged to hierarchical authority or cooperative networks. The elders were about to make their last stand, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The Council Station looked different when Ambassador Sarah Chen arrived. Where once there had been bustling activity and constant diplomatic traffic, now there were empty docking bays and darkened corridors. Nearly half the diplomatic quarters showed no signs of recent occupation. The grand halls that had once hosted delegations from 800 species now echoed with the sounds of perhaps 300. Elder Vorthak met her personally at the docking port, an honor that would have been unthinkable during her previous visit. The gesture spoke volumes about how dramatically the balance of power had shifted in just 6 months. Ambassador Chen, thank you for responding so quickly to our request. His neural crown pulsed with patterns that her translation system interpreted as urgent concern mixed with barely controlled desperation. Of course, Elder Vorthak. What crisis requires such immediate attention? Instead of answering directly, Vorthak led her through corridors that had once been crowded with representatives from across the galaxy. Now their footsteps echoed in spaces that felt more like a monument to faded glory than a center of galactic power. The galaxy faces a threat unlike anything we have encountered in our 50,000 years of civilization, Vorthak said as they walked. Our long-range detection arrays have identified massive energy signatures approaching from intergalactic space. Initial analysis suggests we are facing contact with an external civilization of unprecedented technological capability. Sarah felt a chill of genuine concern. The cooperative network had been monitoring the same detection arrays, but their focus had been on improving internal cooperation rather than external threats. What kind of energy signatures? Structures the size of small moons, moving at near-light speed through the galactic void. Their energy output exceeds anything in our technological database. Conservative estimates suggest their capability surpasses our most advanced civilizations by several orders of magnitude. They reached the Emergency Command Center, a facility Sarah had never seen during her diplomatic visits. The chamber was filled with holographic displays showing the galaxy from multiple angles, with dozens of red indicators marking the approaching objects. Representatives from the remaining Council species worked frantically at analysis stations, their body language conveying barely controlled panic. Elder Thessarian's gaseous form swirled with agitated patterns as she approached. Ambassador Chun, we need to discuss immediate defensive coordination. Whatever these entities are, they represent a threat that no single species or small alliance can face alone. Sarah studied the displays carefully. The approaching objects were indeed massive and moving with impossible speed. Their trajectory would bring them into the outer rim systems within 18 months, with the possibility of reaching core worlds within 3 years if their intentions proved hostile. What do we know about their intentions? She asked. Elder Krythak stepped forward, his crystalline form pulsing with frustrated energy. Nothing. They have not responded to any communication attempts. They appear to be conducting systematic scans of galactic space, but we cannot determine whether these are reconnaissance efforts or preparation for invasion. Elder Morthak's temporal abilities were clearly strained as he struggled to read probability streams surrounding the approaching entities. Their technology interferes with temporal observation. I can see fragments of potential futures, but nothing coherent enough to guide strategic planning. Sarah was beginning to understand why the elders had summoned her with such urgency. This was exactly the kind of galaxy-wide crisis that justified centralized authority and coordinated response. If the approaching entities proved hostile, the scattered cooperative networks wouldn't have the unified command structure needed for effective defense. You're asking Earth to rejoin the Council to face this threat, she said. We're asking for cooperation between all galactic powers, Vorthak replied carefully. The entities approaching our galaxy represent a challenge that transcends our previous political arrangements. Traditional boundaries and jurisdictional disputes become irrelevant when facing extinction. It was a compelling argument, and Sarah could see how the crisis would naturally restore the Council's authority. Species that had been exploring cooperative alternatives would flock back to the established hierarchy when facing an external existential threat. The elders would regain their position as the galaxy's protectors and decision-makers. But something about the situation felt wrong to Sarah's diplomatic instincts. May I examine the detection data? She requested. Elder Vorthak gestured toward an analysis console. Of course. Though I should warn you that our most advanced scientists have been studying this information for weeks without reaching definitive conclusions. Sarah spent the next 2 hours reviewing the sensor data, communication logs, and analysis reports. The approaching objects were indeed massive and technologically advanced. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic database. The communication attempts had received no response. But the more she studied the information, the more questions arose. The scan patterns are unusual, she observed, calling up holographic displays that showed the entity's sensor sweeps across galactic space. They're not conducting military reconnaissance. These look more like scientific surveys. Scientific surveys conducted with technology that could destroy entire systems, Elder Krythak pointed out. The power levels required for their scanning methods would sterilize any inhabited world they examined closely. That's assuming their scans are directed at inhabited worlds, Sarah replied, manipulating the display to show a different perspective. Look at the targeting pattern. They're focusing on stellar phenomena, gravitational anomalies, and regions of space with interesting quantum characteristics. They're avoiding areas with high concentrations of inhabited systems. Elder Thessarian's form swirled with irritation. You're suggesting these entities are peaceful explorers? I'm suggesting we don't have enough information to conclude they're hostile, Sarah corrected. Has anyone tried alternative communication methods? Non-electromagnetic approaches. We have attempted every known form of interstellar communication, Vorthak replied. Radio transmission, quantum entanglement messaging, gravitational wave modulation, temporal displacement signals, and psychic broadcasting through the mind weavers. Nothing has produced a response. Sarah pulled up the communication logs and began analyzing the attempts. They were comprehensive and technically sophisticated, representing the best efforts of galactic civilization's most advanced species. But they all shared a common assumption. "You're assuming they communicate the way we do," she said. "All of these methods are based on technologies and concepts that evolved within our galaxy. What if they use communication methods we haven't discovered yet?" "Such as what?" Elder Morthak asked, his temporal senses trying to follow her reasoning. "I don't know. That's the point. Our entire approach assumes that advanced civilizations will develop along similar technological paths to ours. But what if they took completely different approaches to physics, energy manipulation, or information transfer?" The implications were uncomfortable for the elders. Their entire authority was based on being the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, possessing knowledge and capabilities that other species lacked. The possibility that their technological understanding was fundamentally limited or incomplete challenged the foundation of their power. Even if they are peaceful, Elder Thessarian argued, their mere presence represents a threat. Their scanning technology is disrupting subspace communications across 17 sectors. Their gravitational signatures are affecting stellar stability in 3-star systems. They could destroy us accidentally while conducting their peaceful exploration. Sarah had to admit that was a valid concern. The technological disparity was so extreme that peaceful intentions wouldn't necessarily prevent catastrophic interactions. A civilization capable of moving moon-sized structures at near-light speed might consider the effects of their activities on primitive, galactic life to be irrelevant details. "We need to establish communication," she concluded. "Everything else is speculation until we know what they want and whether they're aware of our existence." "We've been trying to communicate for weeks," Vorthak reminded her. "You've been trying to communicate using council methods and council technology," Sarah replied. "What about alternative approaches?" "Such as what?" Elder Krythak demanded. "We represent the combined knowledge of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. What alternatives could possibly exist?" Sarah smiled, recognizing the opening she had been waiting for. "The cooperative network has been developing new approaches to several challenges. Our working groups include species with capabilities that have never been combined before. Maybe we can develop communication methods that no single civilization could create alone." The chamber fell silent as the elders processed this suggestion. Sarah was proposing that the crisis be addressed through the cooperative model rather than the hierarchical one. Instead of restoring council authority, the external threat could become an opportunity to demonstrate the superior effectiveness of distributed collaboration. Elder Vorthak's neural crown was processing calculations at maximum speed. "You're suggesting a joint project between council resources and your cooperative network?" "I'm suggesting we set aside jurisdictional concerns and focus on solving the problem," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Both approaches have strengths that could contribute to a solution." But, privately, she was thinking something much more radical. The crisis was real and potentially serious, but it was also an opportunity to demonstrate once and for all whether hierarchical authority or cooperative networks were better suited to address complex challenges. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elder Thessarian asked. "Give me 48 hours to consult with network participants. Let me share the sensor data and analysis with our working groups and see what alternative approaches they can develop. If we come up with promising ideas, we can coordinate implementation with council resources. And if the cooperative networks fail to produce useful results?" Elder Morthak inquired. "Then, we proceed with the council's approach," Sarah said. "But if our methods prove more effective, I hope the council will consider the benefits of cooperative problem-solving for future challenges." The elders exchanged communication bursts that were too rapid and complex for Sarah's translation system to follow. She could see the debate playing out in their body language and energy patterns, desperation warring with pride, pragmatism fighting against the desire to maintain control. Finally, Elder Vorthak spoke for the group. "Very well. You have 48 hours. But understand that if these entities prove hostile and arrive ahead of schedule, we cannot afford to delay defensive preparations for experimental cooperation projects." Sarah nodded and activated her communication systems to contact New Horizons Station. "I understand completely. The galaxy's safety takes priority over everything else. As she prepared to transmit the crisis information to the cooperative network, Sarah realized that the next 2 days would determine not just how the galaxy responded to external contact, but what kind of civilization they would become in the process. The elders were betting that crisis would drive species back to hierarchical authority. Sarah was betting that cooperation would prove more effective than control, even under the most extreme pressure. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, and both sides knew it. Within 6 hours of receiving the crisis data, New Horizons Station had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Every available space was filled with beings working on the communication challenge. But, unlike the rigid hierarchy of the Council's emergency response, the cooperative network had organized itself into dozens of overlapping working groups that formed, dissolved, and reformed as new insights emerged. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the central coordination hub, watching the organic problem-solving process unfold around him. The Void Dancers were collaborating with human quantum physicists to explore communication methods based on space-time manipulation. The Data Lords had joined forces with crystalline architects to investigate information encoding techniques that used living crystal matrices. The Mind Weavers were working with Tide Singer empaths to develop psychic approaches that incorporated emotional and environmental harmonics. "This is chaos," observed Dr. Elena Vasquez, but her tone was more wonder than criticism. "No one's in charge, no one's following a master plan, and somehow it's working better than any organized project I've ever seen." The key insight had come from an unexpected source. A young human linguist named Dr. Sarah Kim had been studying the sensor data when she noticed something that the Council's advanced analysis had missed. The entities weren't just scanning random stellar phenomena. They were examining objects and locations that exhibited specific mathematical relationships. "Look at the pattern," she had announced during an impromptu presentation in the station's main auditorium. "They're not interested in stars because of their energy output or planetary systems, because of their potential for life. They're focusing on objects that demonstrate advanced mathematical constants, stellar formations that exhibit Fibonacci sequences, gravitational anomalies that follow prime number distributions, quantum phenomena that display fractal geometries." The implications had hit the room like a wave. These entities might be communicating through mathematics itself, using the fundamental constants of physics as a universal language that would be comprehensible to any advanced civilization. Within hours, a working group of mathematicians, physicists, and xenolinguists from 15 different species had assembled to test the hypothesis. They began constructing messages based on mathematical relationships, encoding them in various physical phenomena that the entities had shown interest in examining. The breakthrough came when the crystalline architects realized they could grow crystal formations that embodied complex mathematical relationships, while the energy shepherds provided power in patterns that match prime number sequences. The resulting construct was a living mathematical message that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ambassador Sarah Chun received updates from the working groups every few hours, relaying progress reports back to the Council elders who were watching the cooperative effort with a mixture of skepticism and growing amazement. "They've identified 17 different potential communication vectors," she reported during her second day at Council Station, "each one based on mathematical principles that wouldn't have occurred to any single species working alone." Elder Vorthax studied the preliminary reports with his neural crown working overtime. "The approaches are innovative, but have they produced any actual communication attempts?" "They're implementing the first test transmission in 4 hours," Sarah replied. "The working groups have reached consensus on a mathematical message that incorporates insights from 12 different species' mathematical traditions." What she didn't mention was that the consensus had been reached without voting, committees, or authority structures of any kind. The mathematicians had simply worked together until they found an approach that everyone agreed was worth trying. The process had been faster and more thorough than any comparable council project. The test transmission was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Instead of broadcasting a signal into space, the cooperative network created a complex mathematical construct near the edge of the galaxy where the approaching entities would encounter it during their systematic scanning. The construct was beautiful to observe, a crystalline matrix the size of a small asteroid that pulsed with energy patterns representing fundamental mathematical relationships. Prime numbers flowed through it in cascading sequences, while fractal geometries bloomed and evolved in its crystal structure. The energy shepherds had managed to encode advanced mathematical concepts directly into the energy fields surrounding the construct, creating layers of meaning that would be apparent to anyone with sophisticated detection equipment. For 36 hours, nothing happened. The entities continued their systematic approach toward the galaxy, showing no deviation from their previous behavior. The council elders began preparing statements about the failure of cooperative approaches and the need to return to traditional hierarchical crisis management. Then, everything changed. The first sign was subtle. The entity's scanning patterns shifted slightly, becoming more focused and deliberate. Instead of random stellar surveys, they began examining specific regions of space with unprecedented detail. Their energy signatures changed, suggesting internal activity and communication among the massive structures. Then came the response that stunned every being in the galaxy. The entities replicated the mathematical construct. They didn't just acknowledge it or respond to it. They built an exact copy and then began modifying it, adding mathematical concepts that exceeded anything in galactic civilization's understanding. The replica was positioned where galactic observers could study it easily, clearly intended as a communication rather than a random creation. Dr. Sarah Kim was in the first analysis team to examine the entity's mathematical additions. What she discovered sent shockwaves through both the cooperative network and the council chambers. "They're not just responding to our mathematics," she announced during an emergency session. "They're teaching us. The modifications they've made represent solutions to mathematical problems we haven't even identified yet." The entities had taken the galactic civilization's best mathematical message and improved it in ways that demonstrated their understanding was orders of magnitude more sophisticated. But, more importantly, they had done so in a way that was clearly intended to be educational rather than threatening. The breakthrough in understanding came when the Void Dancers realized that the entity's modifications weren't random additions. They were invitations to continue the mathematical conversation. Each new element in the construct posed questions that would require collaborative effort from multiple galactic species to answer. Over the next several weeks, an unprecedented dialogue developed. The Galactic Cooperative Network would pose mathematical questions by modifying their construct, and the entities would respond with solutions that opened up entirely new areas of mathematical understanding. The exchange was peaceful, educational, and absolutely mind-bending in its implications. The entities, it became clear, were explorers, but they were exploring mathematical and physical principles rather than territory or resources. They had detected the galaxy's civilizations through their mathematical signatures and were curious about what kinds of minds could develop such interesting approaches to physics and mathematics. More importantly, they were impressed by the collaborative nature of the galactic response. The mathematical constructs had signatures from multiple species working together, something that apparently was rare in their experience with galactic civilizations. 3 months after first contact, the entities sent a delegation. The arrival of their ship redefined galactic civilization's understanding of what was possible with advanced technology. The vessel was itself a mathematical construct. Its hull existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its propulsion system manipulated space-time itself, and its communication arrays transmitted information through mathematical relationships encoded in the fundamental constants of physics. The beings who emerged were unlike anything in galactic experience. They existed partially in normal space and partially in mathematical dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Their communication was conducted through pure mathematics. Their thoughts were expressed as geometric relationships, and their entire civilization was based on the exploration and manipulation of universal mathematical principles. They called themselves the Constructors, and they had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, searching for civilizations that could contribute new perspectives to the universal mathematical dialogue. The meeting with galactic representatives took place at New Horizons Station, chosen specifically because it represented the collaborative model that had made communication possible. The constructors were fascinated by the concept of multiple species working together without hierarchical control, something they had never encountered in their explorations of other galaxies. Ambassador Sarah Chun found herself serving as the primary liaison, not because of any official authority, but because the constructors were most interested in communicating with representatives of the collaborative network that had solved the communication challenge. Your species demonstrates an unusual approach to complex problem solving. The lead constructor communicated through mathematical relationships that Sarah's enhanced translation system rendered as words. Most civilizations develop hierarchical structures that limit their mathematical capabilities to the understanding of their dominant species. We found that cooperation produces better results than control, Sarah replied. Her words automatically converted into mathematical concepts by the translation interface the cooperative network had developed. This is evident in your solution to the communication challenge. No single species in your galaxy could have developed the mathematical constructs you created, yet working together you achieved breakthrough insights that impressed even our analysis specialists. Elder Vorthak, who was present as an observer, interjected through the communication link. The Galactic Council has maintained order and progress for 50,000 years through proven hierarchical methods. The constructor's response was a complex mathematical relationship that conveyed polite disagreement mixed with analytical assessment. Hierarchical structures optimize for stability and control. They do not optimize for innovation, adaptation, or mathematical breakthrough. Your collaborative network demonstrates capabilities that exceed what hierarchical organization can achieve. The implications were staggering. The most advanced civilization ever encountered was validating the cooperative model over the hierarchical one. The constructors had observed thousands of galactic civilizations, and they were specifically impressed by the collaborative approach that humans had introduced. Over the following months, the dialogue with the constructors revolutionized galactic science and technology. They shared mathematical insights that advanced every field of study by centuries. Medical techniques based on mathematical modeling of biological processes. Engineering approaches that used pure mathematics to manipulate matter and energy. Transportation systems that functioned through mathematical relationships rather than mechanical propulsion. But they would only share this knowledge with the cooperative network. When council representatives attempted to claim authority over the exchange, the constructors politely declined to interact with them. Their reasoning was simple. Hierarchical structures were inherently limited in their ability to understand and implement the advanced mathematical concepts they wished to share. Collaboration is not just more effective, the lead constructor explained during one of their regular sessions. It is necessary for advanced mathematical understanding. The universe operates through relationships, not hierarchies. Civilizations that model their organization on universal mathematical principles achieve capabilities that exceed what dominance-based structures can comprehend. The final blow to the Council's authority came when the constructors made an unexpected offer. They invited galactic civilization to join a broader community of collaborative civilizations that spanned multiple galaxies. The invitation was extended specifically to the cooperative network, recognizing it as the form of organization capable of participating in truly advanced interstellar civilization. The offer came with conditions. Participating civilizations had to demonstrate commitment to collaborative rather than hierarchy.